Radio Sultanate of Oman, 90.4 FM, and the Sultan Qaboos Center for Islamic Culture presents 2012 Season 3 of Reaching Out Through Dialogue, presented by Hatem Al-Abdissalam, hosting a group of intellectuals and experts from different fields. Don't miss the interesting discussions on science, comparative religion, culture, education, human behavior, and social issues. Reaching out through dialogue. Only in the holy month of Ramadan.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. All praise be to Allah, the Lord of the heavens and the earth, and peace and blessings be upon His Messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. O Allah, accept our fasting, our prayers, and our supplication. O Allah, grant us knowledge, wisdom, and sincerity. Dear listeners, I'm your host, Hatem Al-Abdissalam. I salute you all with a salutation of the people of paradise. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Please join me in welcoming my distinguished guest, As-Sayyida Basma bint Fakhri Al-Saeed, who is a mental health counselor and a therapist, and an owner of Whispers of Serenity Clinic. Assalamu alaikum, Sayyida
Wa alaikum
Basma.
assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you today?
Alhamdulillah.
It's an honor to have you on the show for the very first time.
Yes, it's an honor to be here. Thank you, Hatem.
You're most welcome. Before we start, today's topic is child abuse. When I first called you
Yeah.
and told you about the show, and you told me about the topic of child abuse, I was a bit worried because this topic is very sensitive and is very, very important as well at the same time.
Very true.
So we need to establish an understanding with our audience to educate them about child abuse. Now tell us, why is this topic very, very important?
Well, because it starts with, as you said, child abuse. So the first word is child. So it starts with a child, which is the beginning, of a life, we'll say. And if a child gets hurt from the beginning of their life, then most likely their life doesn't go in a proper straight line. And that's why it's very important to intervene if it's
At an early
known.
stage.
Yes, it's extremely important.
Now, to make our audience understand better today's topic, what do we mean by abuse?
Abuse is anything that's done against your will. It's more than one thing, abuse. Abuse can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be neglect, and it can be sexual. So it's more than one thing, and it's usually, or we'll say sometimes, it's maybe done by the caretaker or people around that child.
That child.
Yeah.
Sometimes people might be practicing abuse without knowing or
Yes.
without identifying it, that it is part of being abusive.
That's so true. Yeah.
Does it happen very often?
It does. It happens like, we all grow up in an environment where we see how our fathers dealt with us, for example.
Yeah.
And we think, probably that's the best way to deal. So if somebody comes from an environment where he has been, for example, hit or beaten when he has done something wrong, he thinks it's the norm for me to do that with my child, not knowing that there's so many different let's say, of beating or of punishment. Some punishments that people use are very severe. It's not like
That can cause a lot of damage
Exactly,
onto the body or to the kid.
Exactly. It's written in the Holy Quran that you hit without hurt, without severe pain.
Yes.
So it's not like you hit until blood and the child cannot walk and all that stuff. So I guess when you say that, some people do it without them knowing, it's because that's how their knowledge, that's how they grow up. And they think that's the right thing to usually do, if it comes to the physical part.
And normally abuse comes with different levels of consequences. What are these consequences?
There's so many, for me, obviously all of them are really bad, the four typical types. But sometimes I think the emotional one is extremely severe. Now, when you hit someone more than once, sometimes their body gets used to it, you know? But when you start telling that person bad words, or you're a failure, or you don't know anything, this grows up with that person. And his whole life he'll probably be thinking, you know, I'm
a failure.
Yeah, I'm useless. I can't do anything. I'm a failure. My father always said that, or my mother always said that. Or if it's sexual abuse, for example, could have even greater consequences. Fear of getting married, fear of even being close to anyone, fear of the unknown. It's always fear of the unknown usually in the abuse, because it happens suddenly sometimes. So really, all of these types of abuse will definitely affect the person when they grow up.
Sayyidah Basma, let us get to the very beginning, or the cause of the problem. Why do people abuse in the first place?
There's so many reasons. There isn't like in the textbook, even if you open the textbook now or you look on the internet, it's not one or two reasons. It could be that this person was abused when they were young. It could be that this person is actually not well, is undergoing something. It could be, again, jealousy. So there's so many reasons why a person would be abusive. It could be, again, like we said, this is how he was brought up. So I think this is normal. Nobody has stopped him. That's why we say, when we said child abuse is very important, because it really has to be fixed from when the person is a child. Otherwise, they do grow up, and some of them, not 100%, some of them, obviously, if they've been abused, they will abuse.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but most likely.
But most likely.
Yes. For whatever reason goes through this person's head.
Now, child abuse, is it considered to be a criminal act?
Yes, child abuse is a criminal act. The UN actually has done lots of rules and regulations against child abuse. For instance, in 2006, the first UN Secretary General study on violence against children showed the extent of the problem. And it showed that almost 53,000 children died worldwide in 2002 as a result of homicide. That also at least 80% of children suffered physical punishment in their homes, with a third of more than experiencing severe physical punishment. And 150 million girls and 73 million boys under 15 experienced forced sexual intercourse or other forms of sexual violence during 2002. This made them think that, you know, we really have to put some kind of regulation and spread it around the world to say, this cannot happen. And there's always talks and seminars and lots of things going on about this awareness for child abuse.
Now, are there reasons for this kind of act to spread among communities or to develop in certain communities? Are there any particular reasons why this particular trend happens, or it becomes something very, very common?
I would actually say it in one word: because they can do it. That's exactly it. Because they feel, we've done it once, nobody caught us, we can do it again and again and again. And that's exactly what happens. That's why putting rules, putting regulations are very, very important. And acting upon them are important. Not just putting them, actually showing an example of, this happened, this is what's going to happen to you. And showing how severe you will be punished if this happens. And in the end, child abuse has happened, or abuse itself has happened for centuries. Since
the very beginning.
Very, very beginning. It's not like something, it's a modern thing or it just happened now. It's always been happening. The difference is that now we're more aware. Now there's more awareness and people are trying to learn more about it, how to prevent it, doing all these charts, these percentages, so many things. As we said in the beginning, physical, sexual, neglect, emotional. It's like everything. It's a whole human. All of these things happen to one human. That's a lot.
What do you think of communities that are very preserved and they think that talking about abuse is a taboo?
I think that's an extremely big problem. Okay, we have communities or countries will say that actually talk about it and spread the awareness. And even in those countries that spread awareness and they talk about it, it still happens. So you can imagine the communities that don't talk about it, how bad it must be. But I'm not talking about it because of whatever culture, religion. There isn't one religion that says that this is okay.
Yeah,
that's
isn't. For sure.
There isn't. As in culture, yes, this is what the human has done. Yes, the culture, yes, we can't talk about it just because they don't want problems for themselves. or don't want that kind of stigma, or don't want that kind of, people are going to talk about it, which is
and maybe
bad.
even if we go more specific in the Arab world,
Yeah.
we have a lot of tribes, communities, very close communities.
Yes.
Everybody knows one another.
Yes.
And it becomes something which is unwanted, or people don't talk about it because they feel ashamed.
That's
If
true.
something bad happened to their child, if their child has been abused, they feel that, okay, it already happened. I just look for cure for my son or daughter,
Yeah.
but I will not talk about it. I will not do an awareness campaign
Yes.
to go against this.
Yes, and the problem is we don't think that if this has happened to someone we know, it will happen to someone else.
Yeah.
And I think if people just realize this part, it doesn't mean if you hide it because it's happened to someone you know, that means that's it, it stops or it gets cut off. No, it continues. It's like cancer. It becomes something like, oh, they did it, nobody talked about it, we can do it too. And that's the problem. So we always have to think of others as well, not just be self-centered about our problem. It's happened to your child or whoever child is, it will definitely happen to somebody else's child.
Some people think that the people who commit the abuses
Yeah.
should not be treated as criminals. They should be treated as a mental case. So they should go through therapy or treatment. What do you think of this?
I think if this is not treated as severe and it's killing a child's emotion and everything, then I don't know what would be important actually. And yes, some people do have a sickness, but actually they have to go and see a therapist or a psychiatrist and make sure, was it because of the sickness?
So it's not an excuse.
I don't think it's an excuse. Not everybody does it because of a sickness. Some people do it because they can. I guess that is a sickness too, but it's a different kind of sickness. But yes, I definitely think it should be taken extremely seriously. Even if it is a disorder, then it should be definitely taken into consideration and be cured. Because maybe, yes, this person was abused when he was a child. So maybe he does need treatment. But what about the person who wasn't and just does it because he can or she can?
How about schools and public places where you normally find gatherings of kids? Should there be any awareness campaigns, any sort of education for these kids
Definitely.
to understand? Because most of the time they become victims
Yeah,
and they are being threatened
yeah,
not to talk about it,
that's true.
and the abuse continues.
And most of the abuse is not like we think, oh, it's an old man or a big man or an older woman, or sometimes it's the same, or just between
Slightly
just
elder.
slightly a bit elder, and that's actually very common on this side of the world. So that's also something. So they really need to be educated. And some people take it as it's normal. It's something.
It happens between,
something they have to go through, which is really sick, which is really not good. And I think the schools definitely need to do awareness, and they definitely have to have ushers, like time of school break or in the time of when the kids go home, because they're always left. There's a lot of time where kids are just left alone. A lot of the time, kids just walking home alone, which is also very dangerous and scary. If it was up to me, I would say to even create a lesson, a class that teaches how to look after yourself and teaches you how wrong these things are, and spreading that awareness, because if it spreads from that age, it's very useful.
Let us go through the details of today's topic. Take us through the types of abuse in more details.
So we'll talk about the physical abuse first. Physical is anything to do with hitting, biting, bashing. It's anything to do with physical enforcement. So that would be the physical abuse. If we talk about the emotional...
Before you get into the emotional, for the sake of argument, the people who are listening, they would say that what is the difference between physical abuse and discipline?
And discipline. That's
our part of the world,
yes,
smacking your kid or whacking them with a stick is considered to be something normal.
Yes.
Okay. To what extent, and then it becomes an abuse?
In this part, probably I would be one of those people where people wouldn't like me much, because I don't believe in any kind of physical abuse. Even though it is true, it's I'm sure a small little smack, I guess, because it's written that you can in the Holy Quran. So that I cannot obviously go that way. But other than that, whacking, hitting.
If you have other means to discipline and it works and you don't need to get to whack them, why do you whack them in the first place?
Exactly. And that's exactly what people need to know. But then we'll talk about what we said earlier. That's how I grew up. Look how good I am. There's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
Because they don't think that. I had one of my clients that actually had his daughter on a fan, and then when I told him it's wrong, he said, well, my dad used to put me in the well.
Subhanallah.
But then again, see, and I think, okay, kind of, he doesn't know better, okay. But physical, again, discipline, that always is like a mix-up between them.
Again, I'll come back to the same point.
Yeah.
Maybe the assumption that people have that maybe in the olden days, people were not that educated. That's why they take these means. But now that we're saying that people who are abused maybe or disciplined in a particular way when they were younger, when they grow up, although they went to universities and although they are very educated,
still feel that.
they still do the same.
And let me tell you something, as a parent, okay? When your child does something, it's that split minute that you could lose it. That split moment. You could just go the quicker way, and that would be, smack. Or it could be like, okay, you did something wrong, go to the naughty corner, or any other. So it's very, very hard, even though I'm talking about it, but it's extremely hard to just think, no, don't do this, do that. It's a split minute, and it's a quicker solution to it.
Surprisingly, I was talking to one of the scholars in one of the programs. We were discussing about beating kids, and he said that a parent is not allowed to hit a child when he is in anger.
Yes,
because you're not supposed to divert that anger towards your kid.
Exactly.
If you want to discipline your kid, you have to show them that what you have done is wrong, not to the state where you enforce harm on them.
That's true. And sometimes you don't, like, a person doesn't realize they hit the child, then after they think, oh my God, what did I do? I've taken out, as you said, all my anger. And that's why it's always good to calm down. Think, even if you tell the child you've done something wrong, just leave me now and come back again. If you know that you can't, control your anger. But if you work at that point, you're definitely going to do something that's going to be... And some of the children don't even understand why they've been beaten.
This is the other point.
Yeah.
You should always tell them
Definitely.
what they did wrong.
And explain to them how it feels for them as a parent when you do that.
And for a grown-up,
yeah,
to enforce your power towards this child, the comparison is not this. It's not comparable at all.
Not at all.
The force that you might use while you're in anger,
Yeah.
you might cause a lot of harm to the
Exactly.
kid. You might feel that you have just smacked,
Yes.
but actually that smack can cause maybe even severe
Some children
pain.
feel they've been humiliated. It depends on the child as well. Some children think, oh, whatever, I've got hit and I'll get hit again, but I'll go and do whatever I want to do afterwards. Because again, it's just body. It's physical. It's not, for example, I said earlier, emotional.
Yeah.
But what people do, they don't just hit. They use two kind of abuse together. They use the physical and the emotional
Yes.
in one, if you've noticed. So it's not just hitting without talking. It's hitting and talking.
Abusive
You've done
language.
this, you're useless, that kind of thing. So it's
And even
two.
hitting them in front of their brothers or sisters or
Exactly.
friends.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, so we go to the next type, which is the mental.
Which is the emotional.
Emotional, sorry.
Yes.
Emotional.
Emotional is words.
Okay.
It's humiliation, again, like we said. Is telling the child you're useless, you can't do anything. Always is using these really bad words, as we hear sometimes as people using you're a dog, you're,
Yes.
animals. Suddenly you become an animal. So this is more emotion. And you're a failure, you can't do stuff. This grows up with you.
There's something normally parents tend to do
Yeah.
is compare you with other kids.
Yeah, with your cousins or
With
your
your cousins,
sisters.
if,
You start hating your cousins.
especially if they're doing better than you at
Yes.
school, and
And
they
it
always
stays with you.
and
as
they
you grow
always
up.
make you hear the same song that
Yes.
you're useless. Look at your cousins.
Exactly.
Look at your friends.
Or
They're
your
all
peers,
doing
yes.
better.
And this is how the person grows up thinking, yes, they're not. You'd find one of your colleagues or someone really trying every time, and you'd think, what's going on? It's because this person has been told all his life that he can't do this or she can't do this. And this is the reason why he wouldn't even be happy at work, because he always feels like he's a failure or people look down on him, when maybe in reality that isn't true. So emotional abuse is like a scar. You know how the physical abuse can scar your body? Emotional scars
It
inside.
stays for a very long time.
internal, and it stays way longer. Because
Yes.
the body scar could vanish, for example, let's say, if you use whatever. But emotional stays inside of you, so it stays forever.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely right.
We've got also the other two types of abuse, which is...
Before you get, I
could
just
see you thinking.
remember.
I mean, what's he thinking?
I just remembered something.
Yeah.
I think there is a thin line between being abusive, emotional abusive, and pampering, because some parents either they spoil their kids
Yeah.
or they become very rough with their kids.
Yes.
There is always a midpoint.
Yes.
You should be nice, you should be kind
That's
and
true.
loving to your kids, and at the same time,
Yeah.
you should discipline
And
them
it's
in the
weird
proper way.
Because sometimes I think over spoiling your child is kind of abusing him in a weird way. Because then the child grows up not knowing how to function without you around him. That's kind of making him,
Yes.
kind of disabled in a way
Yeah.
in terms of working or emotional and stuff like that. So it could be like a very interesting point to actually look through and study about it.
Next point.
Yeah.
Next type. Sorry.
Next type. We've got the neglect. Neglect can come under not looking after the child's health, not looking after the child's well-being in terms of eating or dress or clean, that kind of type. So that would be neglect. So you'll find this child always looking dirty, for example, or not eating well, hygiene really bad. This would be the neglect type of abuse.
And this is
one of the highest
the
abuses
basic
of all.
rights of the kid
Yes.
is food, shelter,
Exactly.
proper place, proper clothing.
Yes.
I really get so irritated when I'm driving at night around my village and
Yeah.
I find kids 3 years old,
Running
4 years
outside
old,
alone.
running outside,
Yeah.
bare feet,
Yes.
and they are riding their bike on the
Yeah,
streets,
yeah.
and the parents don't even bother.
And you know what they most likely will tell you? We did that when we were young, in our village, and it was fine.
It wasn't the same, and
Exactly.
it's not right. It's
Yeah, and
not
even
right.
at that time, probably things used to happen that nobody knows again. So
Because today, for example, if a car stops and picks up the kid, nobody will know.
nobody knows.
Nobody
And
know.
it used to happen even before, so it's not something new.
Oh,
But
so-
people know about it.
Oh, a car comes and hits
and
the
hits the
kid,
child,
and
for
then
example, yeah.
there is no point
Or
for
the
you to
child-
regret.
Yeah, easily just gets hurt, outside, and then she starts crying. How would the mother know when the child's like miles away playing?
The thing is, it's becoming like, I don't know if you call it a habit or it's just, people get married, get kids for the sake of getting kids,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Yeah,
They
should
don't
put
think
people
about-
through tests before
Yeah,
they
they don't think of the implications of having kids. They don't think the
Responsibility.
responsibility, the
Yeah.
duties. As a parent, what you need to do to take care of these kids until they grow up and become responsible adults
That is
that
true.
can take care of themselves.
And sometimes it's difficult for the parents if they have so many kids. Like if you have more than 10 or 15 or something like that, which a lot
And
of
you can't take
people
care of them.
have some and here. You cannot take care of all of them.
It's true.
It's very, very difficult.
It's true.
So you'd obviously without knowing, you would let go of taking care of some without knowing.
And all the problems within the house, later on they will transfer to the community.
Yes,
and
and
they
this
become big
child becomes a
problems.
parent, and then it becomes a chain, and then that parent again has a child, and then it becomes a parent. So it's a big chain.
That's
that
why
goes
it's
on
very,
and
very
on.
important to focus on this topic today, to tackle it from the very, very beginning.
Yes.
So you mentioned two types, which is the physical and the mental, and you also
And
mentioned the neglect.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have the physical and the emotional, and the
I always say
neglect.
mental. I don't know why.
It's okay. And now we have the sexual. Sexual is very, very, very sensitive. Sensitive, especially. Well, I'm not going to say especially this part of the world. It's
It happens
sensitive.
everywhere.
Yeah, and it's been happening from the beginning, as we said before. Sexual is anything to do with penetration, with intercourse, without the person's will. And that would be sexual. And because if it's a grown-up and the child is very small, they can't fight for themselves. We'll hear a lot of things like, she lured him in or he lured her in. What some people do is they tell the child, come, let me give you some sweets today, or let me give you a toy today. And every day until that child becomes very comfortable, and then he does something bad to that child. Again, usually all these abuses happen not even outside the circle of the family. It could happen within the family.
And that is the most dangerous type, because
then it stays.
you never know when it happens, and
Yes.
you never expect it to happen.
Exactly. So these abuses can happen within the family or within people around the family. So it's not always, like the perception, it's the man that walks alone at night and picks up children. No, it's internal. And then again, we have it that usually it's from maybe a child just a little bit older than that child. So it's not even, a woman or a man. It's actually a child abusing a child, which is even worse. Because then why is that child abusing this child? It must have happened to that child as well. And then we begin in that chain thing. So sexual is one of those things that sadly happens quite a bit. Adding to all of this, we have the sex trafficking, which children are trafficked, around the world for this kind of act.
It's becoming a business.
Yes, it's becoming a business, sadly.
Now, maybe for the general audience, when you mention the word abuse, automatically they relate it to sexual abuse.
Yes.
And maybe the people might not be aware of the other types of abuse that you've mentioned.
Yes.
And maybe they're aware, but they think that it's not very important as the sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And they might be right, they might be wrong.
Yeah.
But my point of view, abuse is abuse.
Yes.
But maybe we should go more into details regarding the sexual abuse, because it's maybe the severe one that happens. What happens in the case of abuse? How can you identify that a kid has been abused? What are the symptoms?
Sometimes it's very difficult to identify, but some of the symptoms is the child start isolating himself or herself. The child seems to be always afraid of something, maybe most likely when they go to sleep. Child becomes aggressive because they have all this anger inside of them and they don't know what to do about it. If the child's in school, maybe they start getting low marks suddenly, again. So that's something to look for. As they grow up and they become teenagers, other things start to happen. Maybe they'll start using substance abuse. So you'd find them taking drugs, smoking, again, being aggressive. That's one type. The other type is just being isolated, not liking to do anything, not liking to interact with anyone. And then actually there's a third type who actually can get over or try and get over it.
Yeah.
So there's always that hope that, and again, it depends on the personality of that child again. So yeah, these are some of the symptoms that they could identify. Obviously, if it's a very young child, an infant, once the nappy is changed, looking for any kind of redness around specific areas, any marks of force. So that's if it's an infant, because it happens from babies even sometimes. So it can go to that extent, which is very sad.
Just talking about it, I just feel sick, that
it's a very
how
sad
can a human
thing.
being can degrade himself or herself to such a level.
Yeah.
And every one of us has a bit of mercy in their hearts.
Yeah. Yeah.
But once you reach to this extent, I think that
It's gone.
It's gone.
Yes.
And you cannot recover it.
And I think the sad thing is that it happens all over the world, which is very sad. It's not like a specific area, or it's not a specific century that this started in. It's been happening for a long time, and it's happening. That's why awareness is extremely, 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 I say 3 times important. From more than one side, the awareness should come out from.
Sayyida Basma, external aggressors, we can try and protect or prevent our kids from direct exposure with them. Will always be around our kids in public places, and so we might try our level best. But internal abusers, members of the family, it's so difficult between a brother and a sister, a father, the maid at home.
Exactly.
What can a parent do? We live in a very different world now, and we need to take care of our kids and make sure nothing harms them. What sort of measures can we take to make sure such a thing doesn't happen to our kids?
As you said, we're always around our kids, but we're not always around our kids. We can't be always around our kids. Our kids go to school, our kids go and play with their friends, and if we're around them all this time, it actually makes them very vulnerable as well.
Yes.
So it's very difficult. As for babies, maybe we could be around them, carrying them, but even them, most likely we'll leave them for just a minute, or you can't.
And anything can happen.
Yeah, anything can happen. I think, again, teaching our children, if somebody does this is wrong. Somebody touches you this way, this is wrong. And don't be scared to come and tell me. That's very important. Because some parents, when their children go and tell them, they actually tell them off. It's your fault. And especially if it's a boy. It's your fault. How could you let someone do this to you? And then the child, goes, oops, what did I do?
What did I do?
And if another child who's being able to sees this, says, oh, I better not say anything. So then again, feeling, that your family is there for you since you're young, it makes everything better. Just being able to talk to them.
How can we make the child not to feel that they are the ones to be blamed? Because they are the victim. But in most cases, they feel that they will be blamed, or they are blamed for whatever has happened.
Because sometimes the abuser tells them that it's your fault. You're the one who's wrong, or you're the one who's dirty, or you're the one. And again, we go back to the family, the father, the mother. Since the child is small, just making that child feel you can trust us. You know, we love you. Anything you say or happens, will be here for you. It's a big difference. I'm sure you've noticed. If you see a parent like very close to their child, they talk to them the whole time. And sometimes it happens from a parent, you know, which is extremely sad.
I think the communication between parents and kids is very, very important.
Yeah.
I remember when I was growing up, my dad was an old-fashioned parent.
Yeah.
And he used to be straightforward.
Yeah.
And from a very early age, when we started going to the public schools,
Yeah.
and he was aware of this danger, that
Yeah.
such a thing can happen.
Yeah.
And he used to tell us that your body is so sacred and nobody is allowed to touch it.
Yes.
The only part that they can touch from your body is your hand, to shake hands.
Yes.
And if in case anybody touches you in a place where you're not comfortable,
Yeah.
just punch. And then
Okay.
we'll sort it out later.
Okay.
He always used to tell
But
us,
see, so you
just
were- you
punch
were-
and
yeah.
then we'll sort it out later.
Yeah, but see, so you're most likely you're able or to go and tell your dad. You know?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. The just trusting your family, trusting, not being so scared of your family that you can't even tell them if something happens to you, because you're worried that consequence is even worse. That is the danger. But if today, me as a parent, I tell my daughter or my son, you know, exactly what your dad said. Maybe I don't know about the punching, but it's a good idea, I guess.
For a boys'
If
school,
they
that's
can.
very effective.
Maybe the girl, the pulling hair. But if I can tell her that, just make her comfortable. That, and always say this: if anything, you can come and talk to me. You know, yes, communication is essential. So if anything happens to you, just come and tell me. And you'll find that child always connected to you, able to tell you. But if you've put that child in fear, then that child will never come and tell you anything.
Yes. Sayyida Basma, if you come across a case of abuse, whether within your family or externally, what are the procedures that you should take as a responsible member of the community?
Okay. For me, as a therapist,
It's different.
But if there was someone that I had found out that they have been abused, I would first go and talk to someone from their family that I feel is a good listener, first of all, and is okay
Trustworthy.
emotionally. Yeah, will not explode emotionally and not be able to handle. That's the first step. The next step, I would definitely tell them, and this is what you're supposed to do if somebody gets abused. You should go and report as soon as that person
To the
is being-
police?
Yes. But not wait until 3 or 4 or 5 days. Immediately you should go, because that's very important.
Okay.
Even for when you write your reports, even if you go to the hospital, they'll tell you, have you gone?
And this, you're talking about all types of abuse or particular types of abuse?
I'm now talking, we're continuing the
Sexual
abuse.
abuse,
Yes.
okay.
The physical and the neglect and the emotional, these can be dealt with. The physical, I guess, again, the police. Emotional and neglect, also, I think neglect goes under also police registration. Emotional has to be obviously taken to a therapist.
Okay.
Yeah. So if this happens, the child is taken to the hospital, or I think to the police, then to the hospital for sure. And then definitely the child has to see a therapist, you know, just to continue with them. Because once somebody is abused, even a grown-up, something gets really broken inside.
Yeah.
And it takes such a long time for that thing to rebuild. And that's what a therapist would help to do. Now, emotional, automatically, you wouldn't know, unless you heard the parent or someone, you know, then you can go and talk to that, if you can talk to that parent or not. It's good. Or find someone who can talk to that parent. If it's an older child and they came and talked to you, you could actually say, why don't you go and see a therapist as well, if you can. So it's different, you know. It's
what
extremely
happens
different.
when it gets very complicated and the parent is the abuser?
Then again, the second parent, unless both parents are abusers, that's again another point. There has to be somebody in the family that
Is responsible.
or can help in a way. But if the parent, the caregiver is the abuser, it's extremely harder, obviously. But then it has to be reported. Because it will continue. And if this parent or this person, this caregiver has more than one child, know for sure it's not just happening to one child. It's happening to the other kids too, or will happen to the other kids too. And if not to that person's kids, then it will happen with other people's kids.
Now let us go through the community. As a community, what should a community do to prevent such acts? Or to spread an awareness, you know. Wow.
I think community, especially, I'll talk about this side of the world, so seeing that we're here. Awareness everywhere. Awareness in our mosques. Mosques is very important for them to talk about,
Yes.
child abuse, because people listen to sheikhs.
That's the
and
only time.
imams.
That's the only time they listen.
Yes, and it's good because these are people who know.
Yeah.
Okay, I would like it if there was awareness through even
Media.
Ministry of Information, which is this is one of the things you're doing now. Education, health. It's not one part only that can do this awareness. It has to be more than one ministry, and they have to be together in this. That's the only way. And in community, as you said, community, people should be together. So if they see this, they should definitely try and tackle it.
And I would like to emphasize on the punishment, because I feel if proper punishment procedures are established, then this will reduce.
Definitely. And talked about.
Yeah.
Because there is punishment, but we just need to know how it goes about, or how is the rules and regulations to this. So it has to be known maybe to the public as well. But definitely punishment is very important.
One of the two criminal acts that I feel that are really sick, and I feel that they should be in the papers, in magazines, everywhere, the pictures of the abusers,
Yes.
is the rapists
Yeah.
and the abusers, the sexual abusers of kids.
Definitely.
These two categories, they should always be exposed,
Yes.
because they are always undercover, and you never know when they will hit.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Become unhuman. I think they become more
unhuman, and then
even animals.
They are
more-
hitting us at a very, very sensitive part of our lives,
Yes, true.
which is our kids.
That's true.
And no one among us would like their kids to go through this torture.
Definitely. And it's very sad because we rarely see this being talked about. And it's like a very red zone once you start talking about it. But that's the thing. It's better to talk about it than to hide it. Hiding it doesn't make it disappear at all.
Yes.
It makes it worse. And that's only what we need to know. But we just need to talk to the right people who know what we're supposed to do.
What about role of parents?
Awareness as well in the house. Like your fathers did one of the parts, which is very good. Just teaching your child, like,
Yes.
this is wrong. It doesn't happen to you, and you don't do it also. Like, we have to think both ways. Like, you don't do it to any other child, and you also, or nobody should do it to you as well. And explain, these are the parts where you shouldn't be touched. These are the parts where it's okay. And if anything, you come and tell us, that kind of thing. And when they're telling them, not tell them, and if anything, you come and tell us, in a very calm gentle way. So they'll understand that it's okay to come and talk about it.
Now, Sayyida Basma, through statistics, what are the major types of abuses that are really inflicting our society? What are the types? What are the categories?
Yeah.
Are we talking about little kids? Are we talking about infants? Are we talking about from parent to a kid?
Yeah.
Or from one kid to another?
Sadly, in Oman, we actually don't have clear statistics yet, or they're not actually released yet, let me say. We are now in Oman, I think people out there, they can correct me if I'm wrong, who are in the Ministry of Health, collecting data and studying it, which is a good first step.
But there
I
are
can't
reports
give you-
in
I can't give
our
you
local
clear-
hospitals.
They are clients, I'm sure, because I've seen some clients myself. That part I can say, but other parts I'm not very clear about yet. But I just know that there is something going on. There is rules and regulations, and I think recently there was a rule that came out for children.
For children.
Yes, so there is things happening.
Now, can you take us please through the recovery period of a child who has been abused? What sort of treatment or what sort of procedure you would go through to take this child to safe zone?
Okay.
And before you get that question, are there chances for recovery, or is it a very, very long process that maybe it might stay forever?
It's a process, but it all depends on the child himself or herself. Each child is totally different, as we are totally different as well as adults.
Yeah.
As for the process, it depends. If you're asking me as a therapist what I do, or what do I tell the parents what to do? It's
Both
different.
sides. Both sides.
Okay. As a therapist, when a child comes to me with this kind, I usually use art therapy for children because it's very hard for them to express. Yes. So through pictures, through drawings. Some children talk. Some children would rather do it, this way, through play. So that's one of the parts. And then I do it gradually. I don't push the idea. I let the child get to know me first and get to know who I am. And trust me, then slowly. It's not a quick process. So it doesn't happen from the first session.
Okay.
Because the child is scared usually. Okay,
Yeah.
that would be if the child was with me, and then we'd go through certain steps and try and make the child feel what happened wasn't your fault. Look after yourself, and to build himself what's broken inside. As for the parents, usually I'll tell them again, I'd emphasize, let them feel safe with you. It doesn't mean put them in a box and don't let them breathe as well,
Yeah.
but just be around them. Take it slowly. Don't think it will happen very fast like a miracle. It takes time to get better. And just always be there, even if you don't talk or that, but just be there next to them. You know, you can even hug them or just sit next to them or talk to them, and maybe not always talk about the topic as well. You know, just once in a while or something like that. It all depends really on the child and how that child accepts the whole process or not.
Do you recommend parents to be overprotective?
No, not at all. Overprotective can make your child actually live a very miserable life. He'll be like he's paralyzed. He can't do stuff. So it's very difficult. You know, it's like a kind of pull and push procedure. You want to look after your child. You don't want him to get hurt and all that stuff. But also you don't want your child to be super fragile. So it's a process that you have to just, weigh it out.
Is there something called self-abuse?
Yes,
now
self-harm.
That we are living in a small village and we have the access to the internet, the media, the channels, and sometimes we leave our kids unsupervised in front of these means of media, and they might learn something from these means that would harm them. How can we deal with such a thing?
That's not called self-abuse or self-harm. That is just supervision that we have to just be aware of. I don't agree usually that kids should have their own TV in their room, and that because that's actually family time as well. It should be together. Also the internet and all that. I think the internet should be in the sitting, like
in a living room.
In a living room
where everybody can
where everybody is sitting. And then there's also other things you could put parent control on the TV. You can put parent control on the on the internet. That's very important, because sometimes without knowing, the child will just be surfing normally
and these
somebody
pop-ups
will pop up. Yes. And sometimes there is abusers in the internet. They'll chat with them, they'll tell them meet me somewhere, so there's so much things, and as we said, we can't be everywhere. It's very difficult. So putting these things like putting parent lock on certain channels, on the internet, blocking certain sites would be something that we could do in our lifetime now, in this modern kind of century.
Although it is difficult,
yes,
because there is a lot of means of access to the internet.
Now we've noticed even, I don't know at your time, but I wasn't even allowed to answer the phone when I was small, unless somebody says me go and answer. But now we even see kids with mobiles. So that's another extra thing to think about. The more we grow up, the more things are becoming even more
exposed.
Complicated and more exposed. So again, we go back to that point. If you teach your child from a very early age all these wrongs and right, and also teach them that they can come and talk to you, all these things will be dealt easily. But if it's from the beginning that it's not dealt with, it's not explained, then there's so much things, there's so much things that can pop out. And it's very difficult to control all these things at once.
Now that we're speaking about child or children, what about teenagers? Are they considered to be a part of, what we have discussed?
Yes, definitely. Because as the statistics said from the UN, that below 18.
Below 18.
Yeah, so that means they're still considered.
Although they're young adult, they might be mature, they know what's going on.
Yeah, but
they also can go through abuse.
Definitly.
Maybe it's
they can
less
be
than
abused or abusers, the same thing, because they've been abused. So again, but yeah, with as the UN regulation shows, which I said earlier, that it's up until under 18.
Maybe you can help me and help the audience understand better, how do these kids become abusers? You said maybe they have been abused when they were younger.
Yeah.
But how do they develop and become abusers? If something bad happens to you, you wouldn't want to inflict someone else with the same cause of pain.
Yeah.
So how do they become abusers?
Again, it depends. Did somebody intervene since they're children? Did somebody try and correct what happened? Did they talk about it?
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons they'll become... It's very different. Again, we say each child is different. Some children think, well, it happened to me, then I should do it to someone else.
Yeah.
Like their brain just functions like that. Some will say, no, it happened to me, then I can't do it. So, and they keep it inside of them until they grow up, and you see them acting abnormally,
Yeah.
in some situations. So again, it depends on the child. It depends if there's been any intervention from the child when they were younger or not.
I came across an information, and I don't know how far it is true, and I just wanted to check with you. We come across some young men or young boys who are a bit feminine.
Yeah.
And then when you talk to their parents and this, or if you talk to the community and they say that maybe they've gone through abuse when they were a child, and this is the consequence of that.
Yeah.
Is this practical? Does it happen if you get abused, and then you might, the whole structure of your hormones, of the way you feel, they would change? Does it affect your personality when you grow up?
There is a percentage of boys that would happen to them. I don't know about the switch of hormones, but it would happen to your system, kind of.
So you feel feminine?
I don't know if you feel feminine, but you feel you've been abused that way. And maybe, when these kids get abused, sometimes they actually, in a weird way, they actually enjoy it. Because they don't know anything else. Because they're still young.
Yeah.
So they think that this is how it's supposed to be. Because when you're abused when a very, very young age, you don't know anything better.
Yeah.
So it goes on with you. And you grow up, and then you become
an abuser.
And if you're abusing the same, the same gender, then that's how you become, not feminine, I'd say, but I'd say more and liking, same gender.
Same gender.
Yes. It doesn't mean if you abuse the same gender, that means you're feminine. No, it's sometimes you're male, but you just feel this is.
You get attracted. You get attracted to
male
the
more
same
than
gender.
female. Yes, but the hormones and that's a different case.
Is there a possibility of cure at a very late stage? A young man, if he's 18 or 19 or 20, and they have gone through this trauma.
Yes,
is there still an opportunity for recovery, for therapy, for
definitely
treatment?
There is. Maybe it won't be as fast as when you're younger, as everything else. When you're younger, everything heals a bit faster. Because as you grow older, it becomes molded a bit more.
The main problem is people have the assumption that it's too late for me now to get a cure, or it's too late to get help.
Yeah, it's never too late. It's never too. Even if you're not 18 or 19, maybe you're even 40, because some of the cases, men when they're 40, then they talk about what happened, or 50 or 60. They've held it in all these years, which is even harder. There is always a time for cure, but you have to feel inside of you that you want to get over this thing. Cure. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Tell us a bit about therapy, because people have the fear to approach a therapist or counselor.
Yeah.
They feel that whenever I step into a clinic, a therapy clinic, then there's something wrong with my brains.
Yes.
So just to educate people, to get them understand that you're not the enemy, and you're there to help them.
Stigma against mental health has been, is always there. Okay, it's like the dark part of medical side. And our side of the world, I understand, because people would worry about confidentiality.
Yeah,
they'd worry, we're such a small community. You'd probably tell this person, that person, and if they don't understand that it's an oath and it's your job, you would never do that. The other thing about our job, that people usually think at this side of the world, that maybe it's the work of the jinn. It's not. There's nothing wrong with me. It's somebody did something to me, and I have to go to the shaykh.
This is a very, very, very interesting thing that you said.
Yeah.
That most of the time, the symptoms that we have, they are medical symptoms, and we just need to see a therapist.
Yes.
But the community and the assumption and how people are brought up, they always feel that, no, I have a jinn inside me or something.
And then the next part is, as you said medical. Then the next part is they'll think it's medical, it's physical, it's not psychological. So that would be the next bus stop, we'll say. So the first bus stop would be at the Sheikh, the second bus stop will be to see all these doctors in Oman, outside of Oman, all around the world, and they say there's nothing wrong with you. Then the third bus stop would be, now maybe I should see a therapist. And then they will come, which if they stop there the first stop, it would have been easier.
It would
for
have
them.
been easier.
Yeah.
Do you get to a position where before you start treating your patients,
Yeah.
you explain to them that your job is there to support
Definitely.
them, to help them? It's not necessarily that you have lost it.
Yeah,
you just,
no, definitely.
You just need a particular type of attention.
Yes, and definitely every client that comes to us, we always explain the procedure.
Mm-hmm.
We explain what they're going to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
We explain every session what we're going to be, talking about. So we laid out everything on the first. The first session is extremely important for us to know. And it's extremely important for the client to know if he's happy to go on with this or not. So it's one of those things which it's very good. It takes a lot of work. It's harder than taking medicine because you have to really work on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And but it stays forever.
Sayyida Basma, any last words in relation to today's topic, which is child abuse, before we wrap up today's session?
Yeah, I'm very thankful that you've talked about this challenging topic. It takes a lot of power to actually think I'll talk about it. The most important thing I'd like to say is, again, is hiding something will never disappear. Working on it will actually make it better. If there is anyone who's been abused or in any way you feel this person needs help, please seek help earlier than later, because the longer it stays, the worse it gets, and it affects other people as well, not just that person. So it's good to also think of others rather than just think about only ourselves as well.
Sayyida Basma bint Fakhri Al Saeed, thank you so much for being with us on the show. And I hope this is not the last show together. Inshallah, we'll continue in the coming years with more sessions, for more beneficial sessions, inshallah.
Inshallah.
And
Thank you very much, Akh Hatem. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
You're most welcome. And I hope our audience have enjoyed it and was very fruitful for them.
Yes.
And maybe whoever heard us today and is suffering from a particular problem of child abuse can always go and seek help and find a cure for this, inshallah.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Dear listeners, I'm your host, Hatem Al-Absalam, signing off for today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
You have been listening to Reaching Out Through Dialogue.